The Clock is the student newspaper of Plymouth State University and among its oldest student institutions, predating even the name Plymouth State. After COVID, Jacob Downey and a group of Plymouth students made it their mission to revitalize the Clock to again keep the students of Plymouth State informed about what happens on their campus. The Clock's attempts to cover student government would pit the staff of the Clock against their fellow students fighting for access to cover allegedly public meetings.
The advising student newspaper has been probably the most interesting advising experience I've ever had, certainly the most enriching. And as someone who believes very strongly in the First Amendment, believes strongly in, protecting freedoms and getting students to think about that kind of stuff deeply and critically, it's been a wonderful experience to see them put those sort of principles into practice.
I have to say I'm really proud of the Clock and its editors and writers for stepping into some difficult situations and trying to stand up for what they thought was right in terms of journalism, freedom of information, and all that goes along with being a good paper.
At the beginning of my senior year, we decided to start covering the student government meeting. The first meeting we went to, the second they started voting on anything, they kicked us all out of the room.
They were looking for ways to get us out. They were looking for ways to call a closed meeting. They were looking for ways to get us to stop recording, to take us out of the room when they needed to vote, when they needed to make the individual decisions.
The Student Senate spends our money on clubs and organizations. And because they're representatives and because they are making decisions on our behalf, because they are spending our money, we ought to know how they're making their decisions.
And we went through the entire student government bylines and constitutions just to read over all of their laws, their bylaws, the amendments that they have to conduct themselves by, and combing through that and obviously finding that the way that they were conducting themselves wasn't within their own guidelines.
And we pushed and we prodded, and around the time of their last meeting of the year, it wasn't just our reporters showing up to these meetings, it was students from clubs from all across the, spectrum of campus who had read our reporting and who had been talking to other students on campus, other staff writers of the Clock, who recognized that this is, if we're going to have a student government, this is not the way that it should function, and went in and demanded things change.
And we had 30 or so students march down to a student senate meeting and say, hey, you really need to be responsive to your constituents. You need to be representatives if you're in a student government. And they kicked us out again.
It was just constant pushback, constantly having them, no matter what we were writing, no matter the ways in which we were trying to tell the student body what was going on in that room, they were continuing to find ways to push us out.
And after winter break, student senate meetings started up again, and kind of mysteriously, they said, oh, we have this resolution that we think will probably pass today. All the e-board has agreed that it's a good idea, and we're going to allow recording, and we're going to record the meetings ourselves.
So even leaving aside whether a student org like the SGA has to follow rules about right-to-know laws in the state, they should, as setting an example of what governance is in an educational institution. And the Clock did its job in fighting for those rights and pushing back as newspapers have historically done when they didn't have access to that. So I think that's one real takeaway here. It's just about the function of government in a democracy, and that we should be modeling that for our students.
I can guarantee that before we started covering this, no one on this campus knew what was going on in those rooms. And I think that's really a disservice from Student Senate to not let its students know, its constituents, what's going on in that room. It's a huge disservice to our community. And so I think that it's really, really important.
I think the administration did a great job at letting the students find the solutions, because that's what a teaching university is all about, letting the students find the solutions so they can be the leaders. And I actually think this story is the best of all possible outcomes. I think in a lot of ways everybody won.